On Christmas Eve, I sat alone at a table set for three. The candles had burned down to nothing. My daughter had fallen asleep on the couch waiting, still wearing the red velvet dress she'd picked out herself because, she said, Daddy always noticed when she wore red. I called his cell at 11 o'clock. He picked up on the second ring. There was music in the background. Laughter. The unmistakable sound of a fireplace crackling and glasses clinking. And then, underneath all of that, a voice I recognized better than almost any other voice in my life, soft and warm and laughing at something he had just said. My best friend's voice. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in my kitchen in Oakville, holding the phone against my ear, looking at the untouched plate of food I had kept warm for 2 hours, while my husband and my best friend of 16 years rang in the holidays together in Whistler. She had told me she was visiting her family in Kelowna. She had texted me that very afternoon, just landed, so exhausted, talk soon, and I had sent back a string of hearts. My husband said hello twice. Then the line went quiet. Then he hung up. I blew out the candles, covered the food, and carried my daughter to bed without waking her. Then I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a very long time, not crying, not thinking, just listening to the particular kind of silence a house makes when it has been emptied of everything that mattered. I want to tell you who I was before all of this, because it matters. I was a registered nurse. I had worked my way through a degree at the University of Toronto, graduated with honors, and spent 4 years on a cardiac care unit in downtown Toronto before I met my husband at a fundraiser for a children's hospital. He was charming and tall, and he asked me questions and actually listened to the answers, which was rarer than it should have been. We dated for 2 years, got married in Muskoka on a Saturday in September, and I was genuinely, uncomplicated happy. When my daughter was born, we talked about childcare and schedules and splitting everything down the middle the way people our age were supposed to. But his real estate development career was taking off in ways neither of us had quite expected, and the hours were brutal, and the nanny we'd hired left without notice after 3 months, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, almost without a formal decision being made, I became the one who stayed home. My nursing registration lapsed. That's a real thing that happens in Ontario. You have to maintain continuing education hours to keep it current, and I missed 2 cycles while managing a household, a toddler, a husband who traveled constantly, and the 100 invisible tasks that somehow never appeared on anyone's calendar but mine. I didn't resent it at the time. Or if I did, I folded that resentment somewhere small and private and told myself it was temporary. He made good money. We had a beautiful house. My daughter was thriving. I told myself these things so often and so firmly that I almost stopped knowing whether I believed them. My best friend had been beside me through all of it. We had met in residence in first year, lived together through university, been each other's maid of honor. When my daughter was sick at 3 in the morning and my husband was in Calgary for a meeting, it was my best friend I called. When she went through a hard patch in her own marriage a few years back, it was my couch she slept on. I thought I knew her the way you know the geography of your own house by feel, in the dark, without thinking. I was wrong about that. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a kind of suspended unreality. My husband came home on the 27th with a bottle of wine and an explanation about a last-minute work trip that had gone sideways, a client in Vancouver who needed hand-holding. He was sorry, he should have called properly. It was a crazy time. He was so smooth and so specific and so thoroughly unbothered that for a moment, a shameful, brief moment, I almost let myself accept it. But I had heard her voice. And I knew what it meant. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That instinct surprised me. I had always thought of myself as someone who would go straight at a problem, direct and unafraid. But something quieter and more calculating woke up in me instead. Something I hadn't known was there, and it told me to wait. To watch. To learn before I acted. So that's what I did. His home office had always been a closed room. That was an unspoken agreement that had settled into our marriage early. His space, his files, his business. I'd respected it for nearly a decade without really thinking about why. But on the 2nd of January, when he left for a site visit in Mississauga and my daughter was at my parents' place for the afternoon, I walked in. The room was immaculate. Degrees on the wall, an industry award from the Ontario Home Builders Association, a framed photo of him shaking hands with the mayor at some gala event. Not a single photo of me or our daughter. Not one. I had always thought of that as a work boundary. You keep your personal life separate. Standing in that room, I understood it differently. I sat down at his desk. I started with the filing cabinet. I want to be clear that I am not a forensic accountant. I am a woman who spent 4 years assessing critically ill patients in a high-pressure unit, learning to read data quickly and identify things that were out of place. Those skills, it turned out, transferred. It took me 3 separate afternoon sessions over 2 weeks to piece together what I was looking at. There was a numbered company I had never heard of registered in Ontario. There were transfers regular, documented, unremarkable if you weren't looking for them moving money out of the household accounts and into a holding company. There were 2 properties I had not known we owned. There was a proposal document, dated 8 months earlier, for a mixed-use development project in Etobicoke. And on the cover page of that proposal, as the lead financing contact, was the name of someone I recognized. I had gone to nursing school with her. We weren't close, we'd lost touch after graduation, but I remembered her clearly. Sharp and principled, and the kind of person who genuinely did not like being lied to. She had gone into real estate finance, I knew from LinkedIn, and she was now a managing partner at a firm in downtown Toronto. I sat with that information for several days before I decided what to do with it. I want to be honest about what those weeks felt like. There were mornings when I stood in the shower with the water running and couldn't move. There was a Tuesday afternoon when my daughter looked up from her coloring book and asked me if everything was okay, and I had to hold it together with everything I had to smile and say, of course, why wouldn't it be? And then excuse myself to stand in the laundry room for 5 minutes with my back against the wall. I was not okay. I was also becoming, quietly and deliberately, someone my husband had badly underestimated. I called a family law lawyer in Toronto, not the one my husband occasionally golfed with, but one I had found independently, a woman with a reputation for being tenacious and detail-oriented in high-asset divorces. The consultation cost me $350 and was worth every cent. She explained to me the concept of the matrimonial home under Ontario's Family Law Act, the way pension assets and RRSPs are calculated in equalization, and what the presence of undisclosed corporate assets could mean for the outcome of a settlement. She also told me very calmly, very clearly that I should not move anything, not confront anyone, and not make any financial moves without speaking to her first. I followed every word of that advice. In the meantime, I registered for a re-entry program to renew my nursing registration. The College of Nurses had a pathway for people in exactly my situation, and I reached out to a hospital in Burlington that was actively hiring. The recruiter I spoke with was warm and practical. She'd heard the situation before, she said, more often than people might think. I told no one what I was doing. Not my parents, not anyone in our social circle, certainly not my best friend, who had resumed texting me as though nothing had happened. Cheerful messages, a photo of a new coffee shop in her neighborhood, a link to a podcast she thought I'd enjoy. I responded to every single one. I was lovely. I was warm. I said all the right things. Every time I did, some part of me grew colder and more precise. It was my lawyer who first mentioned the Banff conference. She had a contact in the industry, a senior real estate developer who had dealt with my husband's firm on a past project and had some professional reservations he had not made widely known. He was going to be at an annual development conference in Banff in March, a gathering of the people who mattered in Canadian real estate developers, financiers, investors, government planners. My husband was also registered to attend. He went every year. She asked me, carefully, whether I had any independent connections in that world. Whether there was anyone in that space I knew outside of my husband's orbit. I thought of the name on the proposal cover page. I had reached out to my old classmate 2 weeks earlier. I had been direct. I told her I had come across her name in some documents and that I had reason to believe not everything she'd been told about the project was accurate. I asked if she would be willing to meet for coffee. She had written back within the hour. Yes. We met at a cafe on King Street on a Thursday morning. I brought copies of what I had found. She read them without expression and then looked up at me and said, quietly, that some of what she was seeing was inconsistent with representations that had been made to her firm. She was going to Banff. I booked my own flights and hotel that same evening. I told my husband I was going to visit my cousin in Calgary for a few days, a cousin who existed and who had kindly agreed to cover for me, because she had met my husband twice and trusted my judgment completely. My mother came to stay with my daughter. I packed a dress I had bought in secret, dark green silk, the kind of thing I had not worn in years. I had my hair done the morning I flew out. I stood in the airport bathroom before boarding and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. I did not recognize the woman looking back. I mean that as a compliment. The Fairmont Banff Springs is the kind of place that makes you feel, the moment you walk through the doors, that the world outside operates by slightly different rules than the one you just entered. The Rockies through every window, the stone and timber of the building itself, the very specific hush of old money gathered together in a professional context. I had been to Banff once before, years ago, on a trip my husband had organized that had been more about client entertainment than anything else. I had stood at the edge of those mountains and felt lucky. I felt something very different walking in this time. The conference opened with a reception on the first evening. I wore the green dress. I found my old classmate near the drinks, and she introduced me to two people I had never met: a woman who ran a family office with significant real estate holdings, and a man who was one of the lead planners on a municipal development project in the GTA that my husband had been privately positioning to bid on for months. I knew about that project because I had read his files. At some point during the evening, across the room, I saw my husband see me. The expression on his face, I will not pretend I didn't take some satisfaction in it. He had expected me to be in Calgary. He had expected me to be, as I had been for the better part of a decade, somewhere adjacent to his life, manageable and accounted for, and not standing in the middle of his professional world in a green silk dress, deep in conversation with people he needed. He crossed the room. He said my name pleasantly, the way you say someone's name when you are in public and everything is fine. I smiled. I introduced him to my old classmate, whom he recognized with a flicker of something behind his eyes, and to the family office woman, who mentioned, conversationally, that she'd been hearing my name in connection with a very interesting conversation about the Etobicoke project. He went still. I excused myself to refresh my drink, and I did not come back. Later that evening, I took a photograph on the terrace overlooking the valley. Mountains behind me, lit against a clear March sky, my old classmate laughing beside me, the family office woman on my other side. It was a good photograph. I looked like someone who had never once doubted herself. I sent it to my husband's cell with no message attached. His first call came 4 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Then the second. Then the third. I put my phone face down on the terrace railing and looked out at those mountains for a while and thought about all the things I had set in motion that he didn't yet understand. I flew home to my daughter 2 days later. I brought her a bag of maple candy from the hotel shop and held her for a very long time in the arrivals hall while she told me, in enthusiastic detail, about every single thing she had done with my mother while I was gone. My husband was home when we arrived. He tried to talk to me that evening after she went to bed. He was not smooth this time. He was careful and slightly frightened, and I could see him trying to calculate how much I knew and how much I didn't. I told him, very quietly, that I had spoken with a lawyer, that I had documentation, that the conversation we were about to have would go much better for both of us if he was honest and significantly worse if he wasn't. He tried the word overreacting once. Only once. What followed was 4 months of the most exhausting and clarifying experience of my life. My lawyer was methodical and relentless. His lawyer was expensive, and expensive lawyers cost money that, once the court was aware of the numbered company and the undisclosed properties, became a very complicated subject. The equalization of net family property under Ontario law did not treat hidden assets kindly. The RRSPs were split. The matrimonial home's value was divided. He ended up with considerably less than he had clearly been planning for. I did not pay a single cent in spousal support. That conversation was brief. My best friend's husband found out not from me, but because these things have a way of surfacing, and they were already living in a house of cards that had been built on the same lies as mine. Her marriage did not survive the year. I heard this secondhand. I did not reach out to her, and I did not feel the satisfaction I had expected to feel. Mostly I felt tired on her behalf, and on behalf of her children, and I let it go at that. My parents took longer than I needed them to. There was a period, and I will be honest about how much this hurt, when they tried to stay neutral, to frame it as a private matter between two people, to avoid the discomfort of choosing. My mother, who had watched my best friend grow up in our kitchen, found it especially hard to assign blame squarely. I sat with them at their table in Mississauga on a Sunday in June, and I was direct in a way I had not been with them before. I told them what I had found. I told them what it had cost me. I told them that neutral was not a position available to people who loved me, and that I needed them to decide whether they did. They came around. It took a few more weeks, but they came around. I went back to nursing in September. The orientation period was humbling. Medicine moves fast, and 4 years away from practice is not nothing. But the competence came back faster than I expected, like something that had been sleeping rather than gone, and the charge nurse told me at the end of my 3rd week that she wished she had more people who paid attention the way I did. My daughter is 9 now. She is funny and particular and deeply interested in how things work, which I choose to take as a compliment. She doesn't ask many questions about why things changed, but when she does, I answer them simply and without commentary. She seems, on balance, fine. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for, and less fooled than we assume. I planted a garden last spring, something I had always meant to do when we moved into that house and never gotten around to. Tomatoes, herbs, a row of sunflowers along the back fence. I am not a natural gardener, but I am persistent, and persistence, I have found, covers a great deal of ground. On an evening in late August, I was sitting on the back step with a glass of wine, listening to the neighborhood settle into its end of summer quiet, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was my old classmate. She was going to be in Burlington the following week for a meeting. She wondered if I wanted to grab dinner. I set the phone down on the step beside me and looked at the sunflowers, which were doing exactly what I had planted them to do, tall and bright and completely indifferent to the fact that they had any reason not to be, and I thought, yes, I really do.